January 11, 1947. Positive ideas in the work. II. Let me repeat again that we should not do anything negatively. Whatever you do or rather have to do not do it negatively. Last time this was spoken of, together with the subject of positive ideas and how man in general is kept at the notes do, re, me, over and over again. Real development is impossible because he does not possess sufficient positive ideas to jump and reach the note far and so approach the sphere of conscious man. Now it is obvious that if we do anything negatively we have not a positive idea connected with it. Looking at life, we find considerable reasons for having negative ideas about it. The most of literature is negative, the most of poetry is negative. History is a history of crime, and so on. How, it might be said, can we have positive ideas under such circumstances? Only by a new set of ideas, another range of ideas. Negative ideas have very great attractive power. A negative idea, such as that the universe is meaningless, can draw millions into its vortex and hold them as in prison. This takes away the chance of individual growth from them and so renders them subjects for more suggestion. This is the effect of negative ideas, namely, to destroy individual importance and meaning and inner individual thought and make a man dependent on the outside and so more and more under the power of external life. We here catch a glimpse of the meaning of negative ideas as distinguished from positive ideas. A positive idea puts a man less and less under the power of the outside, of external life. You remember that it is constantly repeated in the work that, as long as life is the third force, you cannot change. That is, this inner development, possible for man, which all esoteric teaching is about, cannot take place. The work says that unless a man has undergone his destined development he remains in the experiment of creating a self-developing organism on earth, as distinct from the animals and plants, etc., that form the main bulk of organic life. Life, as third or neutralizing force, keeps outer personality active and inner essence passive. Yes, but one must begin to ponder for oneself as to what this means. The real man remains undeveloped by life. Only another force, coming from another direction and having another range of ideas, can bring about the lessening of the life-formed personality, with its craving for visible rewards, and lead to the stirring and awakening of the inner man, the essential man, the development of which is the object of esoteric teaching. Now, to interrupt the theme for a moment, what does esoteric mean? In the New Testament the outer man and the inner man are spoken of. The outer man is called the exoteric man, the inner man the esoteric man. What does this mean? The outer man, the personality, may be well trained and will never steal, let us say. But if all fear were removed, he would steal. But if the inner or esoteric man were developed, he would not steal, understanding why not. He becomes internally responsible, that is the difference. If the inner man were developed, no police would be necessary. Now, in us, life develops the outer man, but not the inner man. Esoteric teaching is therefore about the development of this inner, as yet undeveloped, essence, the esoteric man. Then, whatever happens in outer life, a man behaves rightly, from himself, internally. In the Greek, means outer, and means inner. Esotericism therefore is a teaching applying to the inner man, to what you are in yourself, apart from external restraints and fears. So the work starts with self-observation, that is, observing your inner states and what you are like. It does not start with external observation as does science. A man, or woman, in this work, must learn by self-observation that what they seem to be, what they pretend to be outwardly, is not what they are internally. Realizing this, they begin to suffer from the sense of contradiction. This is useful suffering. The outer and inner must conform eventually and become one unity. Man asleep takes himself for granted as a unity. When he begins to observe himself, he realizes he is two in the broadest sense, that is, what he pretends to be and what he is. Then he must eventually become a unity. Then outer and inner are the same. This is the first step. To be kind to a person outwardly and hate and murder him inwardly is the ordinary state of man asleep. In this psychological state nothing can change in a man. He is a failure in the experiment of self-development. Now to return to positive ideas. Unless, said Mr. Ouspensky, in so many words, man believes in greater mind, he is useless for the work. To believe in greater mind is to have a positive idea, and without positive ideas no one can develop. A man who thinks he is isolated, independent, that he knows and that he can do with his limited finite mind, with all its ignorance, starts from active do, and then describes a descending octave and so perishes. History is full of such examples. To think one can do is to start from a negative idea. To realize one cannot do and to study how to do and what is necessary is to start from a passive do, that is, to begin an ascending octave. Mr. Ouspensky used often to talk in this way. You might very well think that the idea that you can, for instance, reform the world, change other people, and so on is a positive idea. On the contrary, it is a negative idea. It is as negative an idea as if you were to think that you could, without any very special knowledge, operate on a man's brain. In this work, people who think they can do are called lunatics. Mr. Ouspensky once asked Mr. Gurdjieff what a man has to do to assimilate his teachings. What to do? Asked Mr. Gurdjieff, as though surprised. It is impossible to do anything. A man must first of all understand certain things. He has thousands of false ideas and false conceptions, chiefly about himself, and he must get rid of some of them before beginning to acquire anything new. Otherwise the new will be built on a wrong foundation and the result will be worse than before. How can we get rid of false ideas? Mr. Ouspensky asked. We depend on the forms of our perception. False ideas are produced by the forms of our perception. Mr. Gurdjieff shook his head. Again you speak of something different, he said. You speak of errors arising from perceptions, but I am not speaking of these. Within the limits of given perceptions man can be more or less deluded. As I have said before, man's chief delusion is his conviction that he can do. All people think that they can do, all people want to do, and the first question all people ask is what are they to do? But actually nobody does anything and nobody can do anything. This is the first thing that must be understood. Everything happens. All that befalls a man, all that is done by him, all that comes from him, all this happens, and it happens in exactly the same way as rain falls as a result of a change in the temperature of the atmosphere, as snow melts under the rays of the sun, as dust rises with the wind. Man is a machine. All his deeds, actions, words, thoughts, feelings, convictions, opinions and habits are the results of external influences, external impressions. Out of himself a man cannot produce a single thought, a single action. Everything he says, does, thinks, feels, all this happens. Man cannot discover anything, cannot invent anything. It all happens.